But if you have people that you respect and they just keep banging that message into you over and over and over again, eventually people give up. I just heard a story here tonight about a young man who had all the possible support he could have had, joined the Army, where I know from my experience as a veteran, they build your character. They make you into someone that can come out into this world and be successful. Yet he came back and said he doesn't think he can make it because he's a black man. Where did that come from? Where did that come from? It came from people who have a vested interest in keeping things the way they are. Back in the 1900s, Booker T. Washington said there is a class of people who don't want the patient to get well. That's in the 1900s. I think we still have a few of those around today. And it's important to note that in all of the cities where they reign supreme, Democrats have been in charge for generations. And I try to tell people, I said, think logically. If their solutions were working for you, shouldn't you be better off than you are now? In 1965, 24% of black children were born out of wedlock. Today it's 72%. The black community has spent $4 billion on the abortion industry. They make up 13% of the female population, but 40% of all abortions. In New York City, it's 60%. So whole generations are being murdered. And we're contributing to it. What infuriates me about that is that there are all kinds of great conspiracy theories in the black community about disease being deliberately planted or the levees in New Orleans being blown up. Yet here you have empirical evidence of a sustained assault on the black community through the genocide of abortion, and not only do we ignore it, we support it with our votes and our dollars, and I think that's unconscionable. Everywhere you look, since 1965 and the liberal policies that were enacted and the war on poverty and all of these things that were supposed to make the lives of black people in America better, they haven't succeeded. We still have this crushing urban underclass which isn't able to get out from under things. And the bad part about it is when we see things that succeed, rather than helping those things along, they're like George Wallace standing in the doorway saying no. School choice. Washington, D.C., the D.C. voucher program. A friend of mine actually worked on that program. And one of the things that really struck her were the parents that she worked with. A lot of them single moms. These were people who didn't have education themselves. They were not people that you would look at and think very much of. But they were passionate about giving their kids an opportunity. And they were fearful for their children. You know, a lot of people don't realize school choice isn't just about getting your children educated. It's about making sure they're safe. You have over 91 violent incidents in D.C. schools every year. So your child isn't just worried about going to school and learning reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're worrying about living, about not being hurt or maimed. And that's not a conducive environment for learning. But my friend noted that these women didn't care that they didn't have the education, that they didn't have the background. They knew it was important that their kids had it. And the DC voucher program came out of that. And then the first black president of the United States comes in, and one of the first things he does is kill the program. Even with that, one of the people who worked hard for the program in DC still says that she doesn't believe that it's Obama. It must be his people. I mean, it just breaks my heart when I hear that. And it's part of that identity politics that she mentioned in my bio that I try to campaign against all the time, because I really believe America, first and foremost, is about the sovereignty of the individual. And if you descend into groupthink, first of all, groupthink always ends up appealing to the lowest common denominator in the group. And secondly, if you're not celebrating your individuality, then you as a group aren't growing. Individual success equals group success. And one of the struggles in the black community is that they are conditioned to think as a group, to act as a group. That's why, despite the fact that you have 72% of black Americans in California voting for Proposition 8, decidedly a conservative position on traditional marriage, you have 92% of them voting for a man who's against it, in Barack Obama. Because they identify with him. He's one of them. He's one of us. So, somehow, we have to have people who break out as individuals. I met one of these people this weekend, a Reverend C.L. Bryant. He's spoken at several tea parties, and if you hear about a documentary that's coming out soon called Runaway Slave, that's his working. He was a former NAACP official who realized that the NAACP wasn't going to do anything about the issue of life. And being a minister of the gospel, he had to choose between the two masters. It was either going to be Christ or the world. He chose Christ. And so now, he's a runaway slave. And he's going around the country filming this growing movement of people. And we have a beachhead in Congress now with people like Tim Scott and Alan West. We had 34 blacks run as Republicans. By the way, I have a fear about Alan West, and that is that he is on fire already. Now, I've watched his speeches on YouTube. I've read his statements. I had the chance to meet him in person. I get it. My only fear is it's too early. You know. Now, he's been a man in service for 22 and a half years in a leadership role. As a veteran, for me, that's enough. I don't know if that's enough for the people that would actually be out there considering him, but I have to tell you, I've never met a man who carries humility and confidence in the same package so easily. And I was impressed with what I saw before I met him. I'm more impressed now. And you look at people like him and Herman Cain, who's the quintessential American success story. How can, this one black blogger went after Cain viciously, called him a monkey, minstrel, and a lot of really bad things. This is a man whose parents were so poor, his father had to work 3 jobs, and his mother worked as a domestic so he and his brother could go to college. He got his degree, he worked nights so he could get his master's degree in mathematics, and at the same time worked a job with the Navy as a mathematician. He goes into the corporate world, rises to senior VP at Coca-Cola, quits that job because he wants another challenge. He starts with scrubbing toilets and flipping burgers at Burger King. Pillsbury gives him control of the worst segment of their franchise in the Philadelphia area, and that region becomes the best within a matter of a year. They didn't give him Godfather's Pizza, which was going bankrupt, and within 14 months he made it profitable, and he put together a management team that bought Godfather, so he became the CEO. I mean, this is a man who has a Horatio Alger story that anyone would admire, yet there are people attacking him. That's screwed up. And the funny thing is that there's this unique mythology in the liberal community that I've always noticed. You know how they decry racism, it's racism, we're all racist. I always tell them, Barack Obama had 83% approval before he was inaugurated. You're not going to tell me that half of them became racist overnight. It's not about his color, it's about his policies. So, you look at this whole obsession with race, yet if you're a black conservative, not only will the black orthodoxy attack you with slurs and all the other things, they give sanction to white liberals to do the same. It's the one time they get to let their racism show. I tell you what, if you want to talk about racism, the condescension that says black people can't make it without them is the ultimate in racism as far as I'm concerned. When you take away a person's dignity and you take away a person's ability to fend for themselves, then you have basically rendered them impotent. And to me, that is insidious. You're taking an entire generation of people and basically rendering them the lives of hopelessness. That's what happens whenever they say you can't